Hello, Barbs. Blobs. Hello, Brobs. Hello, Brobs. We're back with chapter, I believe it's 8. The circus. The modern circus is not a survival of the Roman circus, to which it bears very little resemblance. So many pages I have left. Five. How many frickin' pages? 32 plus that, 37. All right, I'm going to try to read 213. The modern circus is not a survival of the Roman circus, to which it bears very little resemblance. It was founded towards the end of the 18th century by Philip Astley. He was an Englishman. This fact is worth remembering with pride, for the circus is the cleanest form of entertainment that has ever been popular. Nor is its fitness for children obtained at the expense of its fitness for adults. The feats, the spectacles, and the clownish fun do not appeal to the intellect, and for this reason, among others, they appeal to intellectuals. For where it is clearly understood that the intellect is not appealed to, it is not left unsatisfied, nor is it insulted. One of the troubles with other popular entertainments, the cinema, for example, is that many of those concerned have an art complex. They strive so hard to be artistic that they forget to be entertaining. This cannot happen very often in the circus. A man who is doing a flying trapeze act concentrates less upon how he does it than upon doing it. If he thinks more of the manner than the matter, he will break his neck. It would be well for popular entertainments if a like fate hung over the heads of all those who are filled with enthusiasm for art. Many of them would pay more attention to what they are doing and less to style, and eventually they would succeed in being really artistic. What do you got, bruv? The circus is superior in one way to other popular entertainments in that it does not occasionally try to raise us to someone else's high standard of intellectual distinction, moral rectitude, or whatnot. It only tries to raise our spirits. You cannot very well improve people in the circus. The only thing you can do with material like clever and beautiful horses, skillful and daring trapezists, nimble and humorous clowns is provide the spectators with first class entertainment. What do you got? It is true that the Russians, and they alone, use the circus as a means of propaganda. The Aldershot tattoo does the very same. It is not run merely that people may enjoy the wonderful spectacles. Nevertheless, even when it is deliberately propagandist, the circus, like the tattoo, is excellent entertainment. This is because the appeal is not to the intellect, but to the feelings. Wise words were spoken by Dickens's Sleary, who had been in the circus business all his life. People must be amused, Squire, somehow. They can't be always a working, nor yet they can't be always a learning. All right. Philip Astley, an impressive-looking man over 6 feet in height, saw active service with a cavalry regiment and rose to the rank of sergeant. In the army, he gave exhibitions of horsemanship to entertain his comrades. No, it's not the Bible, and now you're blocked, you piece of garbage. Philip Astley, an impressive-looking man over 6 feet in height, saw active service with the cavalry regiment and rose to the rank of sergeant. In the army, he gave exhibitions of horsemanship to entertain his comrades. He had learned these from an itinerant equestrian, for although he was the originator of the circus in which horsemanship then predominated, Astley was not the first to give exhibitions of trick riding. Let me check and see if it is the Bible. Hide user on this channel. No, it's not the Bible. About 1760, an equestrian named Price began to give displays at Daubney's in Islington, this place of resort being tea gardens with a bowling green attached. He performed in the open air. Very soon a rival, Sampson, was performing in a field behind a neighboring public house. In 1772, there took place at Daubney's one of the most unusual equestrian and animal training, or rather insect training, turns on record. A man rode standing upright, one foot on the saddle and the other on the horse's neck. On his head and face was a mask of bees. He also rode standing upright on the saddle with the bridle in his mouth, and by firing a pistol he made one section of the bees march over a table and the other lot swarm in the air and return to their hive. That's pretty fucking talented. Let's check this. Astley's Royal Amphitheater. Ducrot as courier. Ducrot as the wild Indian hunter. And then there's May Worth, the Australian rider at Bertram W. Mills's circus. Schumann's Haute Ecole horses at Bertram W. Mills. Circus Olympia. When Astley was discharged from the army, he married the daughter of a trick rider who was herself an expert horsewoman. His general had given him, why does he have a general? His general had given him, on parting, the present of a white charger named Gibraltar, and he bought another horse at Smithfield. With these, he performed in an open field near the site of the present Waterloo Station. He also gave lessons in riding. The circus consisted of a roped-in ring. The receipts were the loose halfpence, which the spectators dropped into the hat, when Astley went round with it after each performance. Meeting with a favorable reception, his next step was to build a rude circus upon a piece of ground near the south end of Westminster Bridge. This was the site of the amphitheater, which was afterwards world famous for nearly a century. The seats were roofed in, but the ring was still in the open air. In Circus Life and Circus Celebrities, Thomas Frost quotes an advertisement of the year 1772 more vividly than ordinary words could do it. The advertisement tells its own story regarding the accommodation for spectators, the program, etc. It will be noticed that Astley's wife was a distinguished rider. Horsemanship and new feats of activity. This and every evening at 6, Mr. and Mrs. Astley, Mrs. Griffiths, what's that say? Cosmethopola, and a young gentleman will exhibit several extraordinary feats on 1, 2, 3, and 4 horses at the foot of Westminster Bridge. These feats of activity are in number upwards of 50, to which is added the new French piece, the different characters by Mr. Astley, Mrs. Griffiths, Cosmethopoly, Cosmethopola, and etc. Each will be dressed and mounted on droll horses. Between the acts of horsemanship, a young gentleman will exhibit several pleasing heavy balances, particularly this night, with a young lady 9 years old, never performed before in Europe. After that, Mr. Astley will carry her on his head in a manner quite different from all others. Mrs. Astley will likewise perform with two horses in the same manner as she did before their majesties of England and France, being the only one of her sex that ever had that honor. The doors to be opened at 5 and begin at 6 o'clock. A commodious gallery, 120 feet long, is fitted up in an elegant manner. Admittance there as usual. N.B. Mr. Astley will display the broadsword, also ride on a single horse with one foot on the saddle, the other on his head, and every other feat which can be exhibited by any other, with an addition of 20 extraordinary feats, such as riding on full speed, with his head on a common pint pot, at the rate of 12 miles an hour, etc. To specify the particulars of Mr. Astley's performance would fill this side of the paper. Therefore, please to ask for a bill at the door and see the number of 50 feats are performed. Mr. Astley, having placed them in acts as the performance is exhibited. The amazing little military horse, which fires a pistol at the word of a command, will this night exhibit upwards of 20 feats in a manner far superior to any other, and meets with the greatest applause. 4 years later, he was advertising the additional exhibition of tumbling and rope vaulting. The price of admission to the gallery was 2 shillings, to the riding school 1 shilling, a price by no means adequate to the evening's diversion. In a few years, Astley had prospered so well that he was able to build an amphitheater. About the same time, he found himself faced with the spirited competition of the elder Dibdin and an equestrian named Jack Hughes, who together had started the Royal Circus on the same side of the river. A few of the items on their programs will show how they tried to go on better than their rival. Astley had ridden with one foot on the saddle and the other on his head, a surprising feat. Hughes rode, said in advertisement, at full speed with his right foot on the saddle and his left toe in his mouth. Two surprising feat. Astley's trick of riding with his head on a common pint pot was surpassed. At the Royal Circus, when a lady, Mrs. Hughes, the business always runs in families, rode at full speed, standing on pint pots and mounted, pot by pot, higher still, to the terror of all who see her. Astley had boasted of a young lady of 9 years old who took part in a balancing act. His rivals vaunted of a little lady, only 8 years old, rides two horses at full gallop by herself, without the assistance of anyone to hold her on. Enough to put anyone into fits to see her. Circus riders of today would have an easy life if spectators were so readily put into fits. An advertisement issued by the Royal Circus contains an interesting reference to Astley. Hughes humbly thanks the nobility, etc., for the honor of their support, and also acquaints his antagonist has catched a bad cold so near to Westminster Bridge, and for this reason is gone to a warmer climate, which is Bath in Somersetshire. He boasts, poor fellow, no more of activity, and is now turned conjurer in the character of Seer the Great. A subsequent advertisement ran, Hughes has the honor to inform the nobility, etc., that he has no intention of setting out every day to France for the 3 following seasons. his ambition being fully satisfied by the applause he has received from foreign gentlemen who come over the sea to see him. Shortly afterwards, Astley and his son John, who was also a clever artiste, went to Paris. Horace Walpole deplored their going in a letter. Astley can make his horse dance minuets and hornpipes, but I shall not have even Astley now. Her Majesty the Queen of France has sent for the whole of the dramatis personae to Paris. Dramatis personae to Paris. The establishment of his circus in Paris under the patronage of Marie Antoinette was resented by the theaters, and they drew attention to the fact that he was breaking the terms of his license by allowing Perraults to perform on foot. He astutely overcame this objection by erecting a stage on the backs of horses so that the artistes were fulfilling the requirements by performing on horseback. However, the circus did not flourish, so he returned to London. But he had paved the way for Franconi's famous Cirque Olympique. And when the glory of English circuses had departed, the path which Astley had laid down in Paris continued to be followed by nations on the continent. The following advertisement, which appeared in 1788, provides comprehensive details of a typical performance at this period. Astley's Amphitheatre, Westminster Bridge. Young Astley's surprising equestrian exercises in the intervals, a new war entertainment, in which will be introduced a single combat with the broadsword between young Astley as a British sailor and Mr. J. Taylor as a savage chief. After which, a general engagement between British sailors and savages, the scenery, machinery, songs, dances, and dresses adapted to the manners of the different countries. Tumbling by a most capital group, a new comic dance called the German Chaucers, with new music, dresses, etc. A musical entertainment called The Invitation, the songs and choruses together with the dresses entirely new. The Educated Mules in Howe's and Cushing's Circus at the Alhambra Palace in 1858. And then there's this Palace of the Queen of Nations, seen from Gulliver's Travels, Astley's Amphitheatre. A grand entry of horses, a minuet dance of two horses, and other extraordinary performances by the horses. A new comic dance called the Ethiopian Festival, in which will be introduced a new pas de trois never performed in London, composed by Monsieur Vermigli, Élevé de l'Opera, and danced by him, Mr. Marquis, and Mr. J. Taylor, representing the whimsical actions and attitudes made use of by the Negroes. After which, a pas de deux, composed by Monsieur Ferrer and danced by him and Madame Fusy, in the character of an Indian prince and princess. The music and dresses entirely new. A new favorite song by Mr. Johanno, called Bow Wow Wow. Horsemanship and other exercises by Master Crossman, Mr. Jenkins, Mr. Lonsdale, Mr. J. Taylor, and Miss Vangable, clown Mr. Miller. The whole to conclude with the new entertainment of singing, dancing, and dumb shoe to speaking music called The Magic World, in which will be introduced behind a large transparent painting representing the enchanted world a variety of magical, pantomimical, farcical, tragical, comic deceptions, together with a grand procession of caricature figures, not frigates, displaying a variety of whimsical devices in a manner entirely new. Doors to be opened at 5:30 and to begin precisely at 6:30. Boxes, 3 shilling. Pit, 2 shilling. Gallery, 1 shilling. Side gallery, fee, 6D. The reference to the dancing of a minuet by two horses is of special interest, as Astley was probably the first equestrian who taught horses to go through a figure and step in time to the music, as will be seen from one of the illustrations dealing with the Middle Ages, and from references in the Bartholomew Fair pages to a dancing mare. The idea of training a horse to dance, like many others in the circus, was not original. Astley, however, brought the dancing to a pitch of perfection which had not previously been attained, and he was therefore the introducer of one of the most beautiful spectacles that is offered by our present day circus. Astley was the finest breaker and trainer of horses of his period. A fire destroyed the uninsured circus in 1794, while Astley, having left it in the hands of his son, was serving as a volunteer in France. Obtaining leave, he returned to London and established his circus in the Lyceum Theatre. He then wrote, or probably dictated, 2 books. One was a description and historical account of the places now the theater of war in the Low Countries. The other was Astley's System of Equestrian Education, exhibiting the beauties and defects of the horse. The latter went through a number of editions, and the profits from the 2 books helped him to rebuild the amphitheater. Peace having been declared, Astley left his son at the amphitheater and went back to Paris in 1802, but in the following year the war was renewed and he barely succeeded in escaping to England. No sooner had he settled down in the same year than the amphitheater was once again destroyed by fire. In spite of the loss, for the insurance covered only about a quarter of the damage, he opened a new building the year after. It contained a stage as well as a ring. The following year, his rivals at the Royal Circus, who were far from being prosperous, were burnt out. Astley built in Westminster another amphitheater known as the Olympic Pavilion. It did not prove a success, so in comfortable circumstances, he gave it up and went to Paris. There he died in 1814 at the age of 72. A few years later, his son also died. The horse which he had received from his general on leaving the army and on which he had performed in the open air survived him and lived to the remarkable age of 42. It was well looked after by the younger Astley and his successor, too. We're going to persevere through this. On the death of the younger Astley, the management of the amphitheater passed into the hands of Davis. He introduced a camel on the stage for the first time in a circus, in the romantic spectacular Alexander the Great and Thalestris the Amazon, and later he brought the first elephant into the ring. In 1830, the celebrated rider Ducrot entered into management, and under him Astley reached the height of its glory. He had already originated the poses, plastiques, a series of horseback studies of classical statuary. On the continent, he had achieved a great success, after which he returned to England, and first at Manchester and then at Astley's. He created a sensation by riding 6 horses at the same time. At Astley's, he had presented an equestrian act entitled Raphael's Dream, in which he reproduced some of the finest works of the Greek sculptors. Oh man. His first melodramatic spectacle after he became proprietor was Mazeppa, which, as everyone knows, is the probably true story of a young youth who, as a result of a love affair, was tied naked to the back of a wild horse which carried him into the steppes of the Don Cossacks' country. Ducrow's spectacle met with so good a reception that it was frequently repeated, not repealed. Another of his famous spectacles was that of Waterloo, the scene of which he sketched on the battlefield. When the season was over, the circus riders sometimes took part in elaborate Drury Lane or Covent Garden productions. In the Drury Lane Rebecca, which was founded on Scott's Ivanhoe, the knights, when they appeared on horseback, were impersonated not by the actors whose names were on the program, but by doubles from the circus. One of the most popular artistes whom Ducrot engaged was an American writer named Stickney, and only 3 or 4 years ago, one of the descendants appeared as a stilt walker at Bertram W. Mills's Olympia Circus. Stickney is mentioned in a very amusing and informative mock act of Parliament of this period, in which the principal figure is the clown. And be it further enacted that when the scenes in the circus commence, the merriman, grotesque, or clown shall not, after the first equestrian feat, exclaim, "Now I'll have a turn to myself." Previous to his toppling like a coach wheel round the ring, nor shall he fall flat on his face and then, collecting some sawdust in his hands, drop it down from the level of his head and say his nose bleeds. Nor shall he attempt to make the rope dancers a balance pole stand on its end by propping it up with the said sawdust. Nor shall he, after chalking the performer's shoes, conclude by chalking his own nose to prevent his foot from slipping when he treads on it. Nor shall he take long pieces of striped cloth for Mr. Stickney to jump over, while his horse goes under, previous to which he shall not pull the groom off the stool, who holds the other end of the same cloth, neither shall he find any difficulty in holding it at the proper level. Nor after having held it higher and lower shall he ask, "Will that do?" And on being answered in the affirmative, he shall not jump down and pull his hands in his pockets, saying, "I'm glad of it." Nor shall he pick up a small piece of straw for fear he should fall over it, and afterwards balance the said straw on his chin as he runs about. Neither shall the master of the ring say to the merriman, grotesque, or clown, when they are leaving the circus, "I never followed the fool, sir." Nor shall the fool reply, "Then I do," and walk out after him. Nor, moreover, shall the clown say that the horses are as clever as the barber who shaved in the red jacket and top boots. Oh, man. move off there. I can't find it. Red boots. He shall not jump down and put his hands in his pockets, saying, I'm glad of it, nor shall he pick up a small piece of straw, for fear he should fall over it, and afterwards balance the said straw on his chin as he runs about. Neither shall the master of the ring say to the merriman, grotesque or clown, when they are leaving the circus, I never follow the fool, sir, nor shall the fool reply, then I do, and walk out after him, nor moreover shall the clown say that the horses are as clever as the barber who shaved the bald magpies at 22 pence a dozen, nor tell the groom in the red jacket and top boots when he takes the said horses away to rub them well down with cabbage puddings for fear they should get collie wobblums in their panda noodles, such spectacles being manifestly very absurd and incomprehensible. Saving always that the drivers, ladies and gentlemen, young ladies and young gentlemen, maid servants, apprentices, and little boys who patronize the theater should see no reason why the above alteration should be made, under which circumstances they had better remain as they are. Can I make it, bro? The wees mentioned were by no means confined to Astley's. Some years before the writing of the foregoing enactment, a circus clown at Bartholomew Fair had been reported as saying to an attendant, Now, John, take the horse off, and whatever you do, rub him well down with a cabbage. It will be seen from the preceding version that the cabbage had developed into a cabbage pudding, which is more amusing than a cabbage. In another traveling circus at the same fair, the clown the clown said that some girls who danced on a slack wire were as clever as the barber and blacksmith, who shaved magpies at 2 pence a dozen. The cost of the operation had remained the same, but the aging magpies had become bald and therefore funnier during the years. To understand an entertainment, one must occasionally look at the audience, and Dickens penned a description which gives us the atmosphere. At last they got to the theater, which was Astley's, and in some 2 minutes after they had reached the yet unopened door, little Jacob was squeezed flat, and the baby had received divers concussions, and little Barbara's mother's umbrella had been carried several yards off and passed back to her over the shoulders of the people. And Kit had hit a man on the head with the handkerchief of apples for scrouging his parent with unnecessary violence, and there was a great uproar. But when they were once past the pay place and tearing away for their very life with their checks in their hands, and above all, when they were fairly in the theater and seated in such places that they couldn't have been had better, and seated in such places that they couldn't have had better if they had picked them out and taken them beforehand, all this was looked upon as quite a capital joke and an essential part of the entertainment. Oh, yeah. Dear, dear, what a place it looked, that Astley's with all the paint, gilding and looking glass, the vague smell of horses suggestive of coming wonders, the curtain that had hid such gorgeous mysteries, the clean white sawdust in the circus, the company coming in and taking their places, the fiddlers looking carelessly up at them while they tuned their instruments as if they didn't want to play to begin, didn't want the play to begin, and knew it all beforehand. What a glow was that which burst upon them all when that long, clear, brilliant row of lights came slowly up. And what feverish excitement when the little bell rang and the music began in good earnest, with strong parts for the drum and sweet effects for the triangles. Well might Barbara's mother say to Kit's mother that the gallery was the place to see form and wonder it wasn't much dearer than the boxes. Well might Barbara had Jesus Christ. Well might Barbara feel doubtful whether to laugh or cry in her flutter of delight. Then the play itself, the horses which little Jacob believed from the first to be alive, and the ladies and gentlemen at whose reality he could lay he could be by no means persuaded, having never seen or heard anything at all like them, firing which made Barbara wink, the forlorn lady who made her cry, the tyrant who made her tremble, the man that sang the song with the lady's maid, and danced the chorus who made her laugh, the pony who reared up on his hind legs when he saw the murderer, and who wouldn't bear of walking on all fours again until he was taken into custody, the clown who ventured on such familiarities with the military man in boots, the lady who jumped over the 9 and 20 ribbons and came down safe upon the horse's back. Everything was delightful, splendid, and surprising. Little Jacob applauded till his hands were sore. Kit cried encore at the end of everything. The three-act piece included, and Barbara's mother beat her umbrella on the floor in her ecstasies until it was nearly worn down to the gingham. Oh man, I need a break. Is this fucking thing done yet? No? Oh, that's right, I shut it off, didn't I? You bastard. Thing. This fucking thing sucks. Traveling Circuit 3. Traveling circuses had come into existence early and had been springing up rapidly since the conclusion of the Napoleonic War. As they occupy an important part in the story of the circus, it is proposed to follow them on their tours for a little before returning with singers, the most famous of them all, to Astley's amphitheaters. The early tenting circuses were unpretentious concerns, usually with no more than 3 or 4 horses, of which perhaps only 2 appeared in the ring. Their principal pitches were the fairs. In order to attract the crowd, the acrobats performed tricks outside the tent. The clown cracked jokes. The horses were placed in a row on a platform, and the showman beat a gong or shouted through a trumpet the attractions of the circus, and an invitation to walk up. When enough spectators had walked up and paid up, the horses were led or ridden down the steps and taken into the tent by an entrance at the side. The programs consisted mainly of 2 or 3 equestrian acts, some tumbling, and feats on the tightrope, but although the performances were short, the artiste had little rest. For the show was repeated all day long as often as the seats could be filled. A performance of this description was seen by Hone in 1825 at Bartholomew Fair, the circus being that of Clark from Astley's. A placard proudly announced that the circus was lighted with real gas in and outside. During the exhibition of the turns, music was provided by a band consisting of a horn and a clarinet. The first performance in the usual ring was given by a man who danced on the tightrope. Then a lady in trousers with a pink gown, which was fully frilled, flounced, and ribboned, and the shoulders of which were in large puffs, danced on a horse as it went galloping round the ring. She also skipped with a hoop and did other feats on horseback, finishing by holding 2 flags in her hands and dancing on the saddle. A male rider rode and danced on another speedy horse and executed daring jumps. The clown, too, was a skillful rider. Up to this point, he had been amusing the spectators by his wheezes and antics on the ground. He now performed amusing tricks on horseback. A spectator, apparently drunk, rushed into the ring and tried to pull the clown from the horse. The manager interposed. The spectators cried, "Turn him out!" The drunk man, however, insisted on having his way, so the clown dismounted, offered to help him up, and threw him over the horse's back so that he fell to the ground. After a great deal of fuss, the man was seated with his face to the horse's tail. Gradually, he righted his position, but after some drunken riding, he fell off. He therefore began to undress, taking off in the process more than a dozen waistcoats, until he stood in only his shirt. One can hear the roars of laughter which arose then, which would have arisen thousands of years before, which arise today at somewhat similar spectacles, and which will arise untold ages hence. He drew his shirt off quickly and appeared in a beautiful fancy dress. Leaping into the saddle, he stood upright and rode round the ring with grace. This well-received turn concluded the short performance. I need another break. My brain's gonna break. Oh, Lord. Oh, man. Oh. Stop right there. Right there, bruv. Saunders, who was famous as a showman for about 3/4 of a century, had been trained in Astley's during the time of its founder. His circus is particularly notable for having included among the performers a boy who was destined to become perhaps our greatest Shakespearean actor, Edmund Kean. Kean was an excellent rider, but like the best of them, sometimes he met with an accident. The marks of one of them remained with him for the rest of his life. When performing some daring tricks in the circus ring at Bartholomew Fair, where, if you went often enough, you met every popular entertainer in the country, he fell from the back of the horse onto the sharp boards which formed the ring. The result was the fracturing of both his legs. A distinguished name is associated with Bannister's circus, which toured in Scotland and the north of England, that of David Roberts, R.A., the chief architectural painter of his day. In 1817, Roberts, the son of a shoemaker, had just completed his apprenticeship as a house painter and decorator, and at this time Bannister, while in Edinburgh, decided to add to the attraction of his circus a stage and a company of pantomime actors. He engaged Roberts as scene painter, and in true conformity with the tradition that, if necessary, circus hands must be useful in more than one direction, the showman inserted in the contract a clause that the scene painting painter should also take part in the pantomimes. Roberts traveled with the circus until the proprietor, as so many had done before and have done since, went bankrupt. Henry Hengler, the father of the famous Hengler family, was already a celebrated performer on the tightrope when he appeared at Astley's in 1807. And later, he was for several years in the service of Ducrot at the same circus. Here his three sons, Edward, John, and Frederick, learned the business. Starwood's impression of Bertram W. Mills' Olympia Circus. Pimpo, the Clown and Red Indians at Bertram W. Mills Circus, Olympia. Pimpo. The whole family then joined the traveling circus of Price and Powell, the latter having married one of Hengler's daughters. When the circus got into financial difficulties, it was purchased by Frederick and Edward, who tented in the summer and spent the winter in populous towns. About 1856, Edward retired and joined his brother John in the keeping of a riding school at Liverpool. Now the sole proprietor, Frederick Hengler, erected a commodious and comfortable circus in Liverpool. And in a few years, so well did he prosper, he had also buildings in Glasgow, Dublin, Hull, Birmingham, and London. At the Palais Royal in Argyle Street near Oxford Circus, he had his winter headquarters, and during the summer months he visited the towns where he had headquarters. Shortly after the middle of the century, George Sanger, who afterwards prefixed his name with the famous Lord, founded his circus, by buying a Welsh pony and a horse. He was still in his early 20s, but his father was a traveling showman and had brought him up in the business of entertaining the public with peep shows and freaks. Sanger taught the pony fortune telling, card picking, and other tricks, and the horse he trained to gallop in circus fashion round the yard of a public house. This was during the winter. In the spring, with the addition of a clown and other performers, the circus opened at Charter Fair in King's Lynn. There and in other parts of the eastern counties, it was well received. And going north, the success at Manchester was so marked that it was possible to add to the stud 9 horses and 2 ponies. A tour in Scotland followed, and although the circus was still a new concern, it had grown so steadily in popularity that by this time the prices, which had originally been a penny and 3 pence, were 6 pence, 1 shilling, and 2 shillings. A year or two later, the circus was faced with opposition from Howe's and Cushing Circus, a large American show which landed at Liverpool. The intention was to put all the English circuses completely in the dark or in the shade. There was only room on the road for one large circus, but Sanger was not overawed by the strength of his rivals. Among the troop of Red Indians which formed one of the attractions of the American circus, he noticed a man who had been with his own show some years before. He was an African Negro. This insight into the business methods of his rivals made Sanger determined to fight them with their own weapons. From a Liverpool slum, he secured 8 wild men and 2 wild women. Red ochre gave their skin a tint. They were decorated with long black hair, feathers, skins, and heads. Fierce-looking weapons were put into their savage hands. They were taught to do war dances, to yell like fiends, and to perform tribal ceremonies. As genuine Ojibways, they were a great success. Or is it Ojibways? Ojibways. Oh, man. Ain't easy being a pimp, I gotta tell you. Oh, man. The Ojibways were more amenable to discipline than the 12 Zulus whom James Lloyd engaged many years later when he was touring Ireland. The Zulus gave their war, marriage, and other dances and appeared in their native costume with shields, assegais, and large knives. Their wildness was disturbingly genuine, this being one of the disadvantages encountered by showmen who, with more honesty than aesthetic perception, preferred nature to art. Nature, it has been said, is pulling up on art, but she has still a long way to go before she produces savages who are equal to the other for show purposes. Nor can she produce such useful elephants. Mention has already been made of the scorn of the Covent Garden machinist for the real elephant in a Drury Lane pantomime. Sanger himself refused the offer of a genuine white elephant because its color was as ebony compared with what the public expected. He therefore used a brush and whitewash. The masterpiece was widely admired. Lloyd's genuine Zulus ran wild one day. A small boy had thrown stones at one of them, who was walking alone in the small Irish town. The savage chased the boy, and a threatening crowd surrounded him. He ran off at full speed to the tent near the circus in which were the other Zulus, and armed to the teeth and shouting, the 12 warriors rushed out among the people who were buying tickets or coming out among the people or, or coming along the road to the circus. Many of them took to their heels, yelling. The Zulus performed a war dance, and it was some time before the showman could pacify them. He did not allow them to perform that night, and shortly afterwards he got rid of them. The Ojibways were not the only card that Sanger played in his encounter with the Americans. He outwitted them by his superior knowledge of the minds of the English public, knowing that when two or more circuses were advertised to appear at the same place about the same time, the public always waited for the last show. He billed all the towns which were to be visited by his rival, as though his own circus was due the following day. The scheme was very successful. Finally, the two shows appeared in Preston at the same time, and the superiority of singers was established. Howe's and Cushing's great circus packed up and went home. Shortly afterwards, Sanger's circus consisted of 60 horses, a troop of 12 genuine Arabs, the more than genuine Ojibways, 6 lions, a band, and a company of artistes. So many wild beasts were added that when Sanger leased Astley's in 1871, the menagerie had become an integral part of his establishment. Oh, yeah. 4. Besides the royal menagerie, which Henry I had set up at Woodstock in Oxfordshire, and which had been transferred in the 13th century to the Tower of London, where it existed until about 1828. The traveling menagerie had a forerunner in the bears, monkeys, lions, camels, and other animals which were met with in the early pages of our story. George Wombwell's was the first great traveling menagerie, being established in 1805, and shortly after it came that of his rival, Atkins. In 1824, Atkins was able to announce a wonderful phenomena, the birth, while the show was at Windsor, of 3 fine lion-tiger cubs. These first offspring of the singular union of a lion and a tigress were exhibited to King George at the Royal Lodge, Windsor Great Park, where the king was pleased to observe that they were the greatest curiosity of the beast's creation he had ever witnessed. A few years later, some of the cubs, with the lion and the tigress, were shown with great success at Astley's. The lion and tigress were very docile and playful. At Bartholomew Fair and elsewhere, the trainer had himself full length upon the outstretched lion, and the tigress jumped upon him, placed her paws on his shoulder, and laid her face sideways on his. The group remained in this position until the trainer rolled off the lion, carrying the tigress with him, and on the floor of the den the 3 of them sported. The same trainer performed a feat that was more spectacular and dangerous. He caused the lion to sit down, pulled its jaws wide open, and for about a minute kept his head in the lion's mouth. Atkins showed an elephant, which he described as being upwards of 10 feet high, 5 tons weight. His consumption of hay, corn, straw, carrots, water, etc. exceeded 800 pounds daily. The elephant unbolted the door of his cage to let the keeper enter, and then bolted it again, took up a sixpence with his trunk, lifted the lid of a small box fastened to the wall, and deposited the coin in it, and fired a blunderbuss. Champ. A good elephant story is told of Wamwell and Atkins about a fortnight before the opening of Bartholomew Fair, which Wamwell never missed. His menagerie was at Newcastle. He gave up all hopes of attending the great annual gathering of pleasure seekers. Being in London, however, he learned that his rival was boasting that Atkins would be the only wild beast show at the fair. Immediately, he posted north, took down the tent, and set out by forced marches for London. On the morning of the opening day, the equipage arrived triumphantly at the fair, but the journey in the great van had been too arduous for the elephant, and at the fair it succumbed. Atkins ironically announced that he was exhibiting the only live elephant in the fair. Wamwell proudly heralded forth the news that he was showing the only dead one. The crowds flocked to Wamwell's menagerie. In 1825, Wamwell obtained one of the best free advertisements in the newspapers that any showman has ever secured by staging the most cruel spectacle that has been seen in this country since traveling menageries were introduced. At Warwick, he baited two lions in their cages, one after the other, with several huge dogs. For months before the event, he had used it as a publicity stunt. Newspapers and individuals had tried to stop it, but the law at that time was helpless. One of the lions, Nero, was a particularly handsome animal and was so tame that he did not turn on the dogs, although he could easily have torn them to pieces. He merely pawed them off, and although in doing so he maimed some of them, he never at any moment took the offensive. So assured was Wamwell of Nero's tameness that he entered the cage immediately after the fight, when the animal was still wounded and bleeding. The other lion, Wallace, was made of fiercer stuff, and when later in the same week he was baited by the dogs, he maimed them so rapidly that they had to be dragged through the bars of the cage or he would have killed them. And that's where we're leaving off because I'm tired as hell. How many pages are left? Quite a bit. 13. 16, 18, 19 pages or so. All right, bros. That's all.